This is a Dynamite Network podcast.
Hi, welcome to the Dynamic Duel podcast, a Rotten Tomatoes approved show that reviews superhero films and series through the lens of the DC and Marvel fandoms. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm his twin brother, Joseph.
And in this episode, we are doing a throwback review to a film we never got to review back when this podcast was a weekly show, and that is Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, I don't know how we never got around to this review. We reviewed the first one with Zach and John, our former executive producers, now the hosts of Senjo World and Console Combat. They were great guests. I had a great time reviewing that first film. Didn't love the first film, but did I love Amazing Spider-Man 2? No, I did not.
I mean, most people didn't.
And honestly, the first time I walked out of the theater seeing it the first time, I actually really liked The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but on every subsequent rewatch, I like it less because its faults are just more apparent. But you know, Jonathan, we did this show for 10 years reviewing films and giving spoilers. We've kind of changed up the format, so these are non-spoiler reviews. But I have to ask you, given the new non-spoiler format of these reviews, do you think Gwen Stacy constitutes as a spoiler for the purposes of this review? Because I can pivot if necessary. Like, I'm being purposely vague, but those who have a passing knowledge of Spider-Man's lore, at least in the main 616 timeline, already know the defining moment that is Gwen Stacy, right?
I mean, you and I do, because we've read comic books for decades now. But for newcomers who may not be familiar with the source material, which, let's be honest, is a majority of MCU fans, it's probably best to leave it as a spoiler.
Yeah, you don't even know that.
I'm pretty confident.
Can you explain why you feel that MCU fans don't read comics?
Anecdotal evidence from 10 years of running a comic book podcast and talking with Marvel fans.
Okay. All right. That's fair. We'll go ahead and get into the review later on this episode, but first, our artificially intelligent former duel simulator, AJ9K, has a quick message for our listeners, so listen up.
Why, hello there. Be sure to tune into the other shows in the Dynamite Podcast Network, including the Console Combat Podcast, where hosts John and Dean simulate battles between popular video game characters. Over on the Max Destruction podcast, hosts Scotty and Gilly pit your favourite action heroes from film and television against each other. And on the Senjo World podcast, host Zachary Hepburn speculates on fights between fan-favourite anime and manga characters. Visit dynamicpodcasts.com or click the link in our show notes to listen to all the shows in the Dynamite Podcast Network. Pip pip cheerio.
Thanks, AJ9K. Now, in our last episode, we did a review of the 1984 film Supergirl, during which we discussed a lot of the characters in that film that appeared in the comic books and asked you who you thought might make a good matchup for some of those characters. The best response we got on our Discord server was a fight between the Supergirl villain Silver Banshee and the X-Men mutant Banshee. I do have to say, it is pretty heartbreaking that we never got to those characters in a duel back when this was a weekly show.
Well, I did include Siren in the X-Factor battle. Siren being Banshee's daughter. But you're right, Banshee is a quintessential X-Men character. It's just one of those ones that we never got around to. Silver Banshee was not in the Supergirl movie, but she is a prominent Supergirl villain. I think this is a pretty good matchup. Both of the characters have sonic screams. They can both fly. They have additional effects with their voices. Silver Banshee, I think, is pretty strong.
Yeah, strong, durable. She could go toe-to-toe with Superman, essentially. But let's find out who won. AJ9K, the results, please.
Here you are, sir.
Oh, this is surprising. The winner of the matchup between Silver Banshee and Banshee is Silver Banshee. Now, that's not the surprising part. The surprising part is how much she won by. It was only 526 of the 1,000 matches, or 52.6% of the time, compared to Banshee, who won 47.4%. I thought Silver Banshee was going to win by a lot more, honestly.
Yeah, considering how strong she is.
And that really is the reason she did win, ultimately, her strength and durability. But Banshee has a lot more going for him than I would have assumed. He's more evasive, he's a better fighter, he's smarter, and he has greater perception.
Yeah, well, he's like a former policeman, so he's a trained fighter, and he's really smart, and also he can do cool things with his voice, like hypnotize people and stun them. I really thought because of his versatility that Banshee was going to actually win this thing, but then I learned that Silver Banshee can throw fire.
Yeah.
So that's stupid. Overpowered DC characters again.
I mean, are you surprised after 10 years that DC characters are better? Come on.
Better isn't the word I would use. I would use the word shitty. But before we get into the review, let's give a quick breakdown of the comic book histories of characters that appear in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in a segment called Who's Who. All right, there are a lot of characters from the comic books that appear in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. We'll start off with Spider-Man, of course, whose real name is Peter Parker. He's the orphan son of CIA agents and was raised by his Aunt May and Uncle Ben in Queens. At age 15, he was bitten by a radioactive spider, gaining spider abilities. Initially using these powers for profit, Peter allowed a thief to escape, only to learn that same man later killed his Uncle Ben. The tragedy taught him that with great power comes great responsibility, leading him to become Spider-Man. As Spider-Man, Peter balanced heroism with personal hardship, including the loss of loved ones, his on-again, off-again marriage to Mary Jane Watson, and the personal torment caused by his rogues gallery. Powers-wise, he possesses superhuman strength, agility, speed, and durability. He can stick to nearly any surface and is warned of incoming danger by a precognitive spider sense. Using web shooters of his own design, he can shoot webs to swing through the city and restrain enemies, and you can learn more about him in our Duel episode against Blue Beetle. Then there's Electro, whose real name is Max Dillon. He was a lineman from Endicott, New York, and he grew up in poverty after his father abandoned his family. Denied a chance at higher education, Max worked for an electric company where desperation led him to risk his life during a rescue. Struck by lightning while in contact with high voltage lines, Max's body was transformed into a living electrical generator. Discovering his ability to produce and control massive amounts of electricity, he became Electro and turned to crime, clashing repeatedly with Spider-Man. Now, I should note that the version of Electro that appears in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is based more off of Ultimate Electro, who appears in Marvel's Ultimate Universe of comic books, wherein he was a genetically altered weapon created by Justin Hammer, turned into living lightning, who had to be contained within a special containment suit. And in the Ultimate Comics, he is blue in color.
Interesting.
Electro can generate, store, and discharge millions of volts, firing lightning blasts or channeling energy through conductive materials. His body is constantly electrified, making physical contact dangerous. He can absorb external electricity to increase his power, manipulate others' bioelectricity to paralyze them, and enhance his own strength and reflexes. He can also travel along electrical currents and levitate by riding electromagnetic fields. You can learn more about Electro in his Duel episode against Jay Garrick the Flash. In the movie is also Harry Osborn, who is the son of Norman Osborn, the founder of Oscorp, who once enhanced himself with an experimental serum that increased his strength and intelligence, but fractured his mind, creating the Green Goblin persona. After Norman's apparent death during a battle with Spider-Man, Harry Osborn discovered the truth about his father and became the second Green Goblin, seeking to continue Norman's legacy and torment Peter Parker. Struggling with addiction and psychological instability, Harry tried to recreate the Goblin formula, but its instability caused progressive physical deterioration. Despite periods of recovery and reconciliation with Peter, Harry ultimately succumbed to the serum's effects and died from toxic degeneration. As the Green Goblin, Harry wielded advanced weaponry and enhancements. He wore armored gear for protection and rode a high-speed goblin glider capable of rapid aerial maneuvering. His arsenal included explosive pumpkin bombs, hallucinogenic gas weapons, razor-edged projectiles, and electrified gloves. While not as refined as Norman's, Harry's Goblin formula granted him enhanced strength, durability, and intelligence. And you can learn more about the Green Goblin in his Duel episode against the Joker. Also in the film was Gwen Stacy, who was Peter Parker's first true love. The two met at Empire State University, where she played a pivotal moment in Spider-Man's tragic history. That version of Gwen Stacy had no powers, but in an alternate universe called Earth 65, she became Spider-Woman after being bit by a genetically engineered spider, eventually finding her way to the mainstream Marvel timeline. And you can learn more about Spider-Gwen in our Duel episode where we pit her against Rocket. Finally, the final character I'll discuss that is in Spider-Man 2 is the Rhino, real name Alexei Sistovich, who was a poor Russian immigrant in New York who turned to crime due to limited opportunities. Recruited by former Soviet scientists, he underwent gamma radiation experiments that enhanced his strength and speed, while a durable polymer suit was bonded permanently to his skin, transforming him into the Rhino, an armored enforcer built for brute force. Initially used as a super assassin, he broke free and pursued his own criminal path, frequently clashing with Spider-Man. He possesses immense superhuman strength, capable of lifting around 100 tons, along with extreme durability that renders him nearly impervious to physical harm. His armor is resistant to most attacks, and it features a horn capable of piercing steel. Despite his size, he can reach speeds approaching 100 miles per hour in a straight charge, though his momentum makes turning difficult. You can learn more about the Rhino in his duel episode against Cheetah. And those are all the characters that appear in The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
And in case it's not clear, there are way too many characters in The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Don't get me started. Don't even get me started.
Except actually, I will, because we have to start the review now.
Oh, okay. Well, let's move on to our main event then, where we review the 2014 film, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Okay, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was released in 2014. It was directed by Mark Webb and starred Andrew Garfield, Emma Stone, Dane DeHaan, and Jamie Foxx. The story follows Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, as he juggles several strenuous relationships, including but not limited to his parents, who mysteriously disappeared when he was a boy, his girlfriend Gwen Stacy, who is potentially leaving New York for Oxford, his best friend Harry Osborn, who is dying of a rare disease, and his stalker fan, Max Dillon, who becomes the villain Electro. Now, I gave the first Amazing Spider-Man movie 3 stars, saying that while the cast was great, the story needlessly retreaded Spider-Man's origin, which was done to better effect in the Tobey Maguire franchise. I didn't love the first Amazing Spider-Man movie, but I remember going into the second one really excited because I knew that it wouldn't have the origin story issues of the first one. And little did I know, Amazing Spider-Man 2 would create its own story issues by losing itself to its own desperate franchise building. For those who may not remember, the first Amazing Spider-Man movie came out just a few months after the Avengers movie in 2012. And that was before studios realized the true crossover potential that cinematic universes could have. The first Amazing Spider-Man movie wasn't as focused on world building as it was trying to put a new spin on a familiar tale. But after Avengers came out, Sony decided it was going to mine the Spider-Man IP by introducing plot threads in the sequel for a whole myriad of potential future film projects. That means that not only did Amazing Spider-Man 2 try to pick up threads from the first film and introduce a new villain in Electro, it also shoehorned Harry Osborn's Green Goblin and a potential Sinister Six franchise into the mix.
And maybe even a Black Cat spinoff.
Right? Yeah, the film tries to do a lot, and I would admire it for its ambition were it not for the very clumsy way it handled most of it. The multiple plot threads it weaves were so disconnected from each other without any thematic through lines or interpersonal relationships. The movie could be described as almost quasi-episodic, in that it'll jump from arc to arc with little to no connective tissue. I mean, you'll have one scene where Peter Parker and Harry state that they've been lifelong friends, which is a surprise to me. Right. But it'll be followed up by a romantic meetup with Gwen, followed up by an action scene fight with Electro, followed by Peter researching his parents. All of those scenes happen at one point within 20 minutes of each other, each scene having nothing to do with each other. It's insanity.
It's a lot. It's too much. I would have cut Electro. I would have cut, well, actually, maybe just Electro.
I mean, yeah, you'd have to cut something, right? But Electro was the most novel element of this film in that we had never seen him as a Spider-Man villain on film before. And Jamie Foxx, of course, is an A-list actor. So it's strange that he ended up being one of the more superfluous parts of the plot.
Well, that's very true. I guess if you didn't have Electro in the film, you would just be retreading the first Spider-Man films with the Goblin arc.
Right. All the plot hopping, though, is nothing compared to what happens at the end of the film, which is some of the laziest world building I've ever seen outside of the DCEU, of course. But like the DCEU is very much guilty of the same rushed approach to getting a cinematic universe going as this film is, in that it tries to introduce too many elements too soon, lacking the MCU's methodical approach of giving characters their due with substantial enough backstory and screen time. Like, you can't shoehorn a cinematic universe into existence. You have to build that shit brick by brick for it to pay off. Unless your name is James Gunn, in which case you just dive into the deep end with a quasi-reboot.
It did strike me the audacity of trying to introduce some of these characters in this film at the very end. Like, I had secondhand embarrassment from what they did.
It's pretty cringe. How do you feel about my James Gunn comment where he's just throwing in every character like you're already supposed to know them into his films?
Well, I mean, I know all the characters, so I don't mind.
Okay.
But, yeah, fuck everyone else, I guess.
Despite all the negativity that I've been heaping on The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I will say that there are some things that the film gets very right. As we mentioned in our review of the first movie, I think Andrew Garfield is my favorite cinematic Spider-Man, and it's in this film that we get our most fully realized version of the non-high school, mature, confident, and capable comic book Peter Parker. And hopefully that doesn't make Tom Holland Spider-Man fans defensive, because, you know, he's amazing, he's great. I'm really looking forward to Brand New Day. It's just that it's taken Tom Holland's character 3+ films or so to get out of that childlike framing and get to the point where Andrew Garfield is in this movie.
Yeah, watching this film, I did wonder why Kevin Feige didn't use Andrew Garfield, because I would agree. In my opinion, he is the best. He's definitely the best actor.
I think they made so many mistakes in the world building with the Amazing Spider-Man franchise that they needed to get away from that, and wanted to make sure that the MCU Spider-Man character wouldn't have that baggage. I will admit, though, that Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker is a little bit too wishy-washy. Like, the dude needs to fucking pick a lane in regards to his relationship with Gwen Stacy. But despite that, I think Andrew Garfield compensates by being such a charismatic Peter Parker. And it also doesn't hurt that he is the best Spider-Man movie costume to date. Like, the design is straight out of the comics with a darker shading, and the eyes are perfect, and when he swings through the city, it looks better than it ever has so far. You know, Brand New Day, notwithstanding, because that looks like it's going to be incredible.
Oh yeah, his lenses were so cool in this movie, way better than the first film. Another thing I would say Andrew has going for him is the best chemistry for a love interest out of all the Spider-Man films.
I absolutely agree, yeah. His chemistry with Gwen Stacy's Emma Stone was off the charts. Speaking of her, I remember being very nervous because I wanted the film to treat the emotional aspect of her story with respect. And I'll say that the film absolutely delivered in that aspect. Like, the film generates so much goodwill from me personally just by how mature and heartfelt the Gwen Stacy arc was handled here.
Yeah, honestly, if I was the studio, I would have been really hesitant to go all in the way that they did. But yeah, absolutely respect them for being true to the source material.
The ending moment regarding Gwen Stacy is definitely a case of tonal whiplash, however, considering how campy a majority of the movie is. Like, I thought Jamie Foxx was inspired casting for Electro. But Electro's characterization here as like a nerdy, schizophrenic electrical engineer who has an unfortunate incident with a vat of genetically altered electric eels? What? Like, fuck, man. It was cringe-inducing. His motivation in this film is to be seen, and he develops a vendetta against Spider-Man for, like, I guess taking the spotlight from him in a seeming betrayal. Like, it doesn't work. Or it only works if you perceive Electro as having this, like, childlike mentality. But dumb villains aren't very interesting, at least to me.
No, the motivation of this villain has to be one of the most awkward of any superhero villain in cinema history. He wants to be seen? Okay? Like, what does that mean? It's weird.
At least they redeemed Jamie Foxx's character in Spider-Man No Way Home.
Oh, man. The characterization, the look of the character was so well done by the MCU. Is just one more aspect of how embarrassing Amazing Spider-Man 2 is when it comes to things like Electro and everything else they failed to do better than other Spider-Man films.
Like Harry Osborn, right?
Right.
I think Dane DeHaan does his best as Harry Osborn, but his arc, which involves finding a cure to a fatal genetic disease that he has, only serves to distract from the main story. Or maybe it is the main story. Who knows? Really, he's only included here as a means to get to the film's climax, I think. But splitting the antagonist role with Electro is a disservice to both villains, ultimately. because Goblin doesn't get enough screen time and he feels tacked on, and Electro essentially gets his thunder stolen from him.
I think Dane DeHaan is a good Harry Osborn. He had a fantastic look in the film, and it seems like he really gave it his all in the performance. It's just that the writing was terrible.
Speaking of tacked on, the Rhino is in this film, played by Paul Giamatti, also played extremely campy. I would say that calling him a villain is arguable in this movie because it was a cameo at best. And the same could be said for Chris Cooper, who played Norman Osborn. And I think he would have made an incredible Green Goblin if we actually, got to see him in the role in any sort of substantial way.
Yeah, if you're going to follow up Willem Dafoe with another actor, Chris Cooper is not a bad choice. The guy is a terrific actor. He was very menacing in the scene that he was in. It's just unfortunate we didn't get to see more from him.
Now, the first Amazing Spider-Man movie's main selling point was revealing the mystery behind Peter Parker's parents. We got a hint of that in the first film. It's somewhat solved in the second one, but the story arc itself was always a fool's errand because Peter's parents aren't supposed to play a substantial part of his story other than giving him the tragic backdrop of being an orphan. So, once again, just another distraction from the main story. But also, there is no real main story. So it's a good thing that the filmmakers decided to spend so much time in trying to sell us on the next installment of the franchise, which of course would never come, because the franchise was rebooted into the MCU just 2 years later with Tom Holland's Spider-Man appearance in Captain America's Civil War. And then, of course, he had his own film 1 year later in Spider-Man Homecoming.
Do you think that was the right call? Like, do you think that this franchise was unsalvageable?
No, I don't think it was unsalvageable. And I think they did a good job of revisiting it in the Spider-Man No Way Home movie. That said, just because a franchise is salvageable doesn't mean it should or needs to be. Kind of like the DCEU. Like, the DCEU is totally salvageable, but they're going a different route. And as a fan, you just have to kind of move on.
I will say this is only my second time watching this film. I did not watch it in theaters, and I didn't hate it, I think, as much as other people do. I will acknowledge that in many ways, it is like the Batman Forever of Spider-Man films.
Absolutely.
But it's also in some ways like the most Dark Knight version of Spider-Man films. So it's like this weird juxtaposition of tone that is unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, making a movie that's part Dark Knight and part Batman Forever just sounds like a horrible movie. Or I shouldn't say horrible. The emotional ending of this film, the spectacular visual effects, they're great, but they don't fully save the movie from being weighed down by shoehorned storylines, campy villains, and its desperate franchise building. I'm going to rate The Amazing Spider-Man 2 3 stars out of 5, a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Just barely.
I mean, the film is uneven. I would be remiss to say, though, that I didn't love the characterization of Spidey, and of course, the film's treatment of Gwen Stacy. Both of those things bump up the score a little bit for me. 3 stars, again, is the same score that I gave the first Amazing Spider-Man film. To me, the first one was a more focused film, despite being a retread, whereas part 2 had more to like about it, but it was also all over the place. So in the end, I don't think either Amazing Spider-Man film was significantly better than the other. That said, I would recommend the second film and not the first one. I think that's the best way to treat this uneven franchise.
I would agree, actually. Yeah, the acting is just way too good. The cinematography is just way too good to pass this up. It definitely has a villain problem, definitely has a story problem, but if you're a Spider-Man fan, it's not the worst Spider-Man film.
Yeah, it definitely hits that middle ground.
Well, that's our non-spoiler review. But Joseph, could you give us a few spoilers, even out of context?
Absolutely. Okay, so in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, you learn that Richard Parker put his DNA into some spiders. I think you know what that means. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, you can see Gwen Stacy get a nosebleed.
Too soon.
And in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, you hear Electro play a dubstep remix of the Itsy Bitsy Spider.
I'm glad dubstep is dead.
That's our review, guys. AJ9K, help close us out.
Thanks for listening to Dynamic Duel. Visit the show's website at dynamicduel.com and follow us on Instagram at Dynamic Duel Podcast. Don't forget to listen to the other shows in the Dynamite Podcast Network, including Max Destruction, Senjo World, and Console Combat.
So, Jonathan, what are you looking forward to that's coming up for DC?
Well, I have to say the latest Supergirl trailer that came out was a lot better than the first trailer, in my opinion. Looks like it's going to be an emotional roller coaster in the same vein that James Gunn likes to deliver. This looks very, very James Gunn. It's not directed by him. Of course, it's directed by Craig Gillespie, but it looks like he's going to deliver a solid Supergirl film.
Yeah, that movie comes out in just a couple months now. We'll be reviewing that as it comes out. The Supergirl trailer was good. It was not as good as the Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer. That thing fucking blew me away. The trailer alone for that film was better than The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I'm really impressed by Destin Daniel Cretton's directing. Like, he's getting some amazing shots that I'm surprised we haven't seen in a Spider-Man film yet, where you have like upside down angles and everything like that. I don't know who the main villain of the movie is going to be, but we see characters like Scorpion and Boomerang, Tarantula, The Hand, Punisher's in the movie, Hulk. It's going to be really damn incredible.
It looked like in the trailer that they were doing the Man-Spider storyline from the comics where he gets 6 arms. If they do that, I would be thrilled. And kudos to them on finding a really awesome storyline for the character that we haven't seen on screen yet.
For sure, for sure. The best part about getting this Amazing Spider-Man 2 review out of the way is that I can now start watching Daredevil Born Again Season 2, which is already started. I definitely need to catch up on it. And I'm also really looking forward to the special presentation at the end of the season for The Punisher, which is called One Last Kill.
Yeah, because of the way they're releasing this special presentation with the Daredevil show, we will be reviewing both of them simultaneously in next month's episode.
So look forward to that. And thank you guys so much for listening. And we'll talk to you next time.
Up, and away.
True believers.
They tiptoed around Emma Stone's story, but everybody already knows what happens. She makes Ryan Gosling play Flock of Seagulls and becomes a prostitute in Victorian-era Paris.